Matthew gives us an earthquake and a descending angel with an appearance like lightning. Matthew describes terrified soldiers shaking and becoming like dead men. Now, none of the other Gospels talk about those soldiers. But Matthew tells us Pilate posted a guard and sealed the tomb. And Matthew tells us they were still standing guard. Never mind, falling asleep while on guard duty was, in the days of old, a capital crime. Now, the first time I really thought about what guards were doing in our Easter celebrations, I began to see all this bizarre to me. Why would Matthew go out of his way, it seems, to militarize Easter? I don't know what guards and soldiers are Easter celebrations. And then I remembered that Matthew, way back at the beginning of the Gospel, Matthew is the one who includes Herod in our celebrations of Christmas. Maybe you remember how that goes. Magi came from the east, looking, they said, for the newborn king. Appointed king of the Jews heard what the Magi had to say. He became frightened. Before all was said and done, he sent soldiers to Bethlehem. I don't want that in my Christmas celebrations either. But there it is. Empire fears the new life. Empire fears hope. Empire fears anything it cannot control. And so, Herod tried to stop God's future before it began. Land to the Holy Family. Hope survived that first attack. So, given the way Matthew describes Christmas, soldiers at the tomb on Easter morning are not merely Jesus had been crucified. The angel highlights that. Kill more than the person of Jesus. They wanted to kill everything he stood for. It was designed to be the final word, proclaiming, this is what happens to anyone who challenges us. To secure their proclamation. The stone was rolled into place. A seal was set to make sure all was secure. So far as anyone in charge was concerned, Jesus had been knocked down for good. But then, got up again. There was an earthquake, Matthew says. An angel came down from heaven and rolled back the stone and sat there on the stone. His appearance was like lightning, Matthew says. His clothing white as snow. Matthew doesn't say, but I imagine the angel wearing a silly grin too, as he watches the guards, Rome's finest, shake with fear, and become like dead men. You see, Matthew flips the script. The guards become symbols of empire's futility. Matthew insists that the ones meant to enforce death look rather they are guarding lives. And the powerless become the first witnesses. That's the women, presumed powerless, but they are the antithesis of the guards. The four Gospels each talk about Easter a little differently, but they all agree on this point. Women were the first to defy empire that day. And that makes them exemplary to this day. As I hear Matthew describe that first Easter, the women stand out for their courage. It was an act of remarkable courage just to show up. It was dangerous to have been publicly associated with Jesus, but the women remained steadfast, start to finish. And great joy. Maybe that's just the nature of something so unprecedented as resurrection. Or maybe that mixture of fear and great joy is what defines their electric courage. Nelson Mandela, among others, leads me to think that that's the case. I have learned resurrection does not spell an end to fear for these women, but rather makes it possible for them to experience joy amidst what otherwise would be only crippling fear. And Christian faith does not remove from us hardships, limitations, and challenges in this life, but it might just create for us possibilities that simply would not be available to us otherwise. The hard reality of that first Easter is that none of the reasons for being afraid had disappeared. Rome would still knock down any who threatened the status quo, who stepped out of line. But if that's the reason for fear, it's abundantly clear that these women simply won't let fear dictate their next steps. They take lively, life-filled steps that immediately propel them to the feet of the risen Jesus, confirming all their fiercest hopes. And they see for themselves that Jesus is on the loose. He got knocked down, but he got up again. And this freed up Jesus, tells the women the same thing the angel had already said, do not be afraid. Though again, it's not at all clear to me that the fear they felt was anything ever paralyzing. They fall to his feet, not like corpses, not like the soldiers, but as people fully alive. And in that moment, it seems to me, they're more than merely witnesses of Jesus' resurrection. They got knocked down, but they get up again and participate in resurrection. For them, resurrection is God's no to empire. If the cross was Rome's verdict on Jesus, the resurrection is God's verdict on Rome. Rome said, might makes right. Peace comes through domination. Truth is whatever power says it is, and crucifixion is the final word. But on Easter, God says, love is stronger than death. Peace comes through justice. Truth is revealed in the vulnerable. And death is not the end. And ever since that first Easter morning, Christians have simply tried to get on with love's program and get up again to live each day as members of the risen Christ. At the beginning of Jesus' life, soldiers march into Bethlehem to kill hope. At the end of Jesus' life, soldiers stand at a tomb to guard despair. But in both cases, God slips past the soldiers, and hope survives, and life rises anew. And the risen Christ meets us on the road saying, do not be afraid. Not because there's nothing to fear, but because fear no longer gets to be the final word. Jesus got knocked down, but he got up again. Everything Jesus lived for and died for got knocked down. But Jesus got up again. Blessed are the poor in spirit. That got knocked down, but Jesus got up again. Blessed are those who mourn. That got knocked down, but Jesus got up again. Blessed are the meek. That got knocked down, but Jesus got up again. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. That got knocked down, but Jesus got up again. Blessed are the merciful. That got knocked down, but Jesus got up again. Blessed are the pure in heart. That got knocked down, but Jesus got up again. Blessed are the peacemakers. That got knocked down. Jesus got up again. Love got knocked down. Mercy got knocked down. Justice got knocked down. Courage got knocked down. Peace got knocked down. Life got knocked down. The good news of God's love for all people got knocked down. But Jesus got up again. We all get knocked down in this life. By grief, by illness, by disappointment, by injustice. But Jesus got up again and calls us to rise and get up again. With fear and great joy. So we proclaim, Hallelujah, Christ is risen.
The Lord is risen indeed. Hallelujah.
And as a celebration of new life, we baptize on Easter when we have the opportunity. So I'm looking for kids to return, hoping they'll come and be witnesses to this. Not quite sure how that's going to work.